When selecting my final photographs, I had to take into consideration what was happening in the images, the colour, framing and the environment. Because the assignment is based on photojournalism, the photographs do not have to be artistically creative, but have to document an event. But that does not mean I can ignore general photography techniques and methods relating to ISO, aperture and shutter speed. Also, if the photographs were being used publicly, they would require editing, so some touch-ups were required. I believe this first picture is strong because of the lighting of the training ground illuminating this confident footballer. Because the subject is focused on the task in hand, I believe it takes the attention away from the photograph being about him. Instead, I feel it draws our attention to the event taking place, which I wanted to achieve. This is aided by the fact there are minimal background distractions allowing us to focus on the subject. The next photo is a bit blurred due to the fast nature of the game, but this particular photo caught before a tackle can display the passion of a sportsman who is enjoying themselves. However, in photojournalism things only happen once, and you have to have your camera ready at all times. Even still, some of the professional photojournalists may still miss it. Like this photo, as long as it's still distinguishable, I still believe it can be used as photojournalism. Potential improvements to be made in the future would be to increase the shutter speed to freeze the image in a sharper state. But by doing this I sacrifice light because the aperture would not open any wider. This could possibly be adjusted in post-production. Despite the floodlights provided, there is still not enough light for me to achieve sharp photographs without reducing the shutter speed below the desired requirements. So I adjusted the ISO to the highest possible level and in cooperation with the aperture and shutter speed made the images bright enough to make them usable. But as a consequence, the noise in the images shot through the roof, and print copies of these images were not going to be acceptable in magazines and newspapers. In order to combat the extreme noise levels, the photographs with the most noticeable noise had to be located with Adobe Bridge and taken into editing with Photoshop, Lightroom and Camera Raw. Using these softwares I was able to adjust and blend the noise with the image to make it less noticeable. But as a consequence the whole image became a tad blurred, causing the image to lose its sharpness. However, as I said before, I believe as long as the image is distinguishable, it's acceptable, unless it has loads of speckles caused by noise. This picture was more of an experiment with styles of photographic imagery. Although the image itself in colour looked perfectly fine, the framing it is in with the players back to the camera looking on the game, I think it gives it a deep meaning kind of feeling. In response to which I adjusted the colour until it was black and white. The radio documentary to which this collection of photography accompanies is based on the Olympic legacy and has it inspired a generation. That being said, and looking at this image now makes it feel metaphorical. We, the nation, being the player looking on to our Olympic Games. Did it really achieve what it set out to do? Practically a perfect image for a magazine or newspaper that decides to cover a similar story about times of the past related to football. On that thought, it would have been better if I achieved a similar image in another Olympic sport other than football. I am least pleased with this picture because of its content. You can't really tell what's going on in it, and I can't really find a mood for it. When I selected this picture for publishing, I viewed it as an overview of the game and the number of people taking part since the end of the Olympics. But now I am critical of its framing, because I've cut off the feet of the person in the foreground. All the focus seems to be on him, rather than everyone. If I was to try and improve this image, I would experiment with wide-angle lenses to capture more players and reduce the attention drawn to any individual player. I think this picture is good as a sports image because it focuses on the player working with the ball, and with the ball in the air, I think it looks like a good action shot. If I was able to improve this photograph, I would crop the image to single out the subject and make it stronger. It would also cut out the distracting light in the background. I like this image because it doesn't identify anyone as being the main subject. I think this is because the person in the foreground has his back to the camera and the person in the background is soft focus. I also like the full body of the shot of the player as he receives the ball, because his shadow is cast on the floor by the lights. I feel this photo is a good action shot as a skilled attacker takes on two defenders. Being a single photographer, it is hard to position yourself correctly for the whole game, so I regret not being able to get a frontal shot of the players. The original image was also very dark, so to achieve its publishable standard, I had to increase its exposure, which helps us see the action more clearly. But it also caused some negatives, such as the man in the background and the colour being washed out. I couldn't really do anything about the man in the background, but he isn't a big distraction from the main image. To fix the overexposed colours, I had to adjust the hue and saturation alongside the contrast to find the correct colours. When photographing sports, it's near impossible to capture all the action with a single photo every time something happens, so it made sense to use continuous shooting, to photograph the action with the hope that one of them will capture the moment. However, as a result, you end up getting several images looking fairly similar. This one, for example, of the player running with the ball. Many of them are going to look the same as he runs past me, so how do I decide which one captures the moment the best? And the answer is I don't know. Is it the expression of determination and passion on his face, the moment he receives or passes the ball? Of course this will vary for different activities, but what I settled for was the overall picture, by capturing the player's movement towards the goal and the rest of the players he has to overcome to get there. Between this photo and its lookalikes, I found it the hardest one to choose from, because they all looked pleasing, but in the end I had to settle for one and I picked this one. In my final sent photographs, some were easier to select than others. Some were framed better and clearly documented the subject. Others were a bit messy and required extensive editing to make them a publishable standard. But as long as an image can make an impression related to the story it is representing, I believe it is worthy of photojournalism, no matter how sketchy it is.